Thank you.
Garrett Hughes.
Speaker, ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. I rise to speak in support of this motion. Mr Speaker, I think it's right that this should go to the Governor-General. We should see these appropriations and draft budgets be agreed to by His Excellency. Mr Speaker, it's important that the three offices we're talking about, the Parliamentary Commission of the Environment, the Office of the Controller and Auditor-General and the Office of the Ombudsman's budgets aren't set by this Parliament in the sense set by the government through the annual budget, Mr Speaker. It's important there's independence, and I would like to acknowledge the chairmanship on the Officers of Parliament Committee of the Speaker, all the members, and I'd like to thank the staff and the office holders for all the work they do for our country. I'd like to thank the Auditor-General Lynn Provost, the Ombudsman Dame Weverly Bacon, Professor Ron Patterson and the outgoing David McGee, and of course the Parliamentary Commissioner Dr Jan Wright, and thank their staff. And I guess to note, Mr Speaker, no doubt the staff holders of all those three offices are huddled around the televisions in their offices watching this motion being debated in our House, and I guess for them it might be disappointing or even galling that while those office holders automatically are getting remuneration increases through the permanent legislative authority, we're not necessarily seeing that for the staff, and I don't believe we are. So I'd like to acknowledge the hard-working staff who have been working very well in difficult constrained fiscal environment. So first up on the vote, audit and budget of the Office of the Controller and Auditor-General. There's no change in the appropriation because they obviously can collect fees. There is an increase in the permanent legislative authority. We'd like to point out the important role they do, but the constrained environment they operate in. As we heard from the member Darian Fenton, they've traditionally done 2 inquiries. However, over the last year, we've seen 6 major inquiries into the likes of the Mangawhai wastewater issue, Bill Liu, Minister Pansy Wong, the Auckland Convention Centre, and these issues are, I believe, vitally important. It's important we get good financial scrutiny of government, of ministers, of state-owned enterprises, and given we've got such a shambles at the moment at Solid Energy, I think it's vitally important this budget reflects the importance this Parliament places on financial prudence and transparency. When we look at the Office of the Ombudsman, again we'd like to thank the staff. We'd like to acknowledge the incoming Ombudsman, Professor Ron Patterson. We think he'll do a good job, Mr Speaker, and welcome him into his role. I guess it's good news because for years the office has struggled with no baseline funding increases, and what we are seeing with this motion and appropriation is just under $1 million for 6 new investigative staff. 6 new investigators is a 12% increase for the Office of the Ombudsman. So while we know the office has been described in crisis in past financial reviews, while the amount of complaints has literally skyrocketed over the last 10 years, we hope these 6 new investigative staff will make a difference. Because it's important, the issues they're dealing about. When the first Ombudsman, I think it was 1962, Sir Guy Powers, said he was Parliament's person, put there for the protection of the individual, it's still the case, but I guess we'd expand that and say actually the Ombudsman is the people's person. He's New Zealanders' person. And I guess with the incoming Ombudsman, we could have a discussion around what is the nature of this office in 2013 and the coming decades. And I think let's have a discussion around how do we get adequate funding so those complaints can be dealt with in an acceptable time frame. Because what we're seeing is complaints taking an awful long time. People aren't getting satisfaction. And I believe had we had a mechanism in place where ministers would have some sort of financial penalty for dealing with complaints, this might be another area for funding increase for the Office of the Ombudsman, might help them do their important work. So let's have a discussion around what does the Ombudsman look like in the coming decades. Do we even call it an Ombudsman? I don't know if a Scandinavian term is the correct term that's going to help engage New Zealanders with the office and the important role they play. Lastly, with the Parliamentary Commission of the Environment, a PLA increase of $10,000, an increase in $100,000 in the baseline increase, which hadn't been increased for 6 years. This is in the report notes appropriately because of cost pressures, and we note the quality of the reports. Obviously we don't agree with all of them in the Green Party, but we do note the hard work all the team of the Ombudsman put behind it. We know there's some increasingly important environmental issues facing our country, which merits the PC's oversight and investigation. And I guess the last point I'd like to leave on is it's been widely signalled by the government, but the Office of the Parliamentary Commission of the Environment is likely to have increased environmental monitoring roles into the future. I think it's right that the baseline increases reflects that, so her office can gear up and get ready for it, because we're in a catch-22 situation at the moment where the increased responsibilities have been widely signalled, the legislation hasn't been introduced, so obviously there hasn't been an increase in appropriations. It's a catch-22 situation. If we value environmental monitoring, if we want to get it right, and I believe we do because it's the basis of our economy, of our prosperity, I think we should have a discussion of that in future years. But Mr Speaker, the Green Party supports this. We'd like to thank those office holders, those staff, the other parties of this Parliament. Kia ora.
Richard Prosser.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on behalf of New Zealand